5 weeks after the index case, the number of COVID-19 infection in Nigeria has continued to rise. The figure has since surpassed 170 cases. States and federal government are taking steps to curtail the spread of the disease. My guest on the program today looks at government's responses to the pandemic. This is Dateline Abuja. I'm Ibrahim Adra. Welcome. The Federal Capital Territory Administration has commenced fumigation of public places as part of the several measures to curtail the spread of the coronavirus. The places affected by this exercise include markets, religious centers, and garages. Let's take a further look at these efforts in the FCT in our FCT in Focus segment.
The streets of the nation's capital are empty as the federal government's order on lockdown comes into full force. However, a few markets are open for limited times to enable residents get some domestic essentials. Wuse Market, a popular shopping spot for many residents of the Federal Capital Territory, is under lock and key. Traders hang around while the market is being fumigated against the coronavirus pandemic. The FCT authorities are proposing to fumigate the major markets, parks and religious centers in the city center and other satellite towns in the territory to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus.
Since this corona, you are watching TV. Nobody knows what. You people will risk your lives in the cars and come. You are not even sure of your neighbor, not even me. We said, okay, let's use today to fumigate inside. Lock it so that tomorrow we know our market is safe and fumigated, so that we'll be on the same page, okay? It is better for us. Are we happy? Yes. It is good. We are sure that where we are selling our things is okay, okay?
The officials get to work, covering every corner of the market, while the minister appeals to the traders to uphold professional hygiene even after the fumigation.
So you are okay the way you are. But wash it again and again. Don't say I've washed. Wash with soap and water. Keep washing. Even if you are in your house, anything you touch, wash.
After several hours, traders engaged in essential commodities are allowed back in the market, but not without going through the appropriate preventive measures.
We are fumigating the entire market. We are ensuring social distancing. The market is 85% closed to ensure that only essential commodities like food items, medical supplies, and essential things needed by families and medical supplies are being made available to the Nigerian public. Everything is being done in line with the ministerial instruction and his team to ensure that FCT is safe and we don't have escalation beyond what we have. The market is, as you can see now, almost partially, completely closed.
The people who are decontaminating the market have just concluded, and as you can see, the traders are filing in to wash their hands before they go back to their various businesses. And of course, you are aware that it is only dealers of essential commodities that are allowed. What we have here in the market is less than 30% occupation because they are the only people who are dealing on food items and other essential products.
The exercise is also taken to the Gwarimpa market, where officials had to contend with the traders. The minister had to appeal to them before the commencement of the exercise.
I appeal to general populace and citizens of indigenous of the Federal Capital Territory and residents to please comply to make job easy. Please comply and support the government to make fumigation easy. It is in the best of our interest that we stay at home. Inhaling some of these substances are also injurious to our lungs. You can see some even with their children. It is unhealthy. So we are giving this market 30 minutes to close up. And all the markets across the Federal Capital Territory should borrow a leaf from this. We are aware of the economic situation and do not want to destroy goods. We are appealing to you in the best of your interest to please stay at home. As for the sellers of the foodstuff, we appeal to you that this period of fumigation could be allowed so that we sanitize the place for healthy living.
At the Utako Motor Park, the Abuja Municipal Area Council is spearheading the fumigation exercise.
The fumigation we are doing today has just come as a coincidence. We have the intention of even fumigate all our markets in order to curtail all these communicable diseases. Unfortunately, the issue of COVID-19 came off, and we now use that time to fumigate all our markets. In fact, today we are fumigating 13 of our markets within AMAC.
The fumigation exercise is also extended to the Federal Secretariat. The plan is to conduct the exercise at intervals for the duration of the pandemic.
We will do it at regular interval. Right now we will do it, and then after some time, you know, this coronavirus has this 2 weeks of incubation period. So things are taking 2 weeks at a time. And we intend to do this, and then we'll keep track of the situation and do it as at when needed. We are calling on the people in general, public, to buy in, to cooperate, to give in, to follow the rules and regulations of this fight against corona. Because if they don't, our success will be limited. So we are calling on all the people to stay away. Anywhere you see fumigation going on, decontamination, please keep your distance. Chemicals have a lifespan. After fumigation, after a number of either hours or days, the potency has gone way down and may not be that harmful. So, but during the fumigation exercise, stay away.
The team also conducted the fumigation exercise at the National Mosque.
Thanks for staying tuned. In case you missed them, here are some of the stories that made the headlines within the week in the nation's capital.
President Muhammadu Buhari finally addressed the nation on the coronavirus pandemic. In the broadcast, he ordered the total lockdown of the Federal Capital Territory, Lagos and Ogun states to contain the spread of the COVID-19 in the country. He also announced several palliative packages for vulnerable Nigerians. In the meantime, the president has signed the COVID-19 Regulations 2020, which declared the coronavirus a dangerous infectious disease. In a statement from the president's spokesman, Mr. Femi Adesina, the regulations give legal backing to the various measures outlined in the president's national broadcast on March 29, 2020, such as restriction of movement. Meanwhile, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has unveiled an implementation guide and protocols document for the seamless implementation of the Presidential Directive on lockdown in Abuja, Lagos and Ogun states. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustapha, made the disclosure at the daily national briefing of the task force. As the federal government looks for ways to insulate the nation's economy from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, President Muhammadu Buhari has directed that salaries be paid. The president's directive came after he received briefing from the committee he set up to assess the impact of the pandemic on the economy.
His directive is make sure salaries are paid, make sure critical infrastructure projects like roads, rails are protected. As much as possible, use local inputs so that we retain value within our economy, and also make sure that you have measures that protect the poor and the vulnerable.
Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has inaugurated the recently constituted Economic Sustainability Committee, which he heads. He says the country was faced with enormous challenges that no government in the history of Nigeria has ever faced.
We are at a very critical and uncertain time in our economic history, and even in our history as a nation. And so what Mr. President has asked us to do is to devise a strategy in order to be able to keep the economy going and also to make provisions to ensure that we're able to retain jobs and indeed even provide more jobs, and even develop the Nigerian economy in a way that would take advantage of the challenges of this time and convert those challenges to opportunities.
Earlier, Professor Yemi Osinbajo presided over a special committee meeting of the National Economic Council, where he called for more public enlightenment on the seriousness of the COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting was held via video conferencing with 8 state governors connected and top government officials. The Minister of Environment, Mr. Mohammed Abubakar, has flagged off a nationwide decontamination exercise in public places to contain the spread of COVID-19. The exercise is also extended to residential buildings considered to be high risk. It has been carried out in conjunction with the Federal Fire Service and will be done across the country. The federal government has approved a total of 70,000 metric tons of grains for distribution to the poor and vulnerable amidst the lockdown directive by President Muhammadu Buhari. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, explained that the first tranche will go to the frontline states under lockdown, and that includes Lagos, Ogun, and the Federal Capital Territory.
I am pleased to announce to you that Mr. President has approved the release of 70,000 metric tons of grains from the National Reserve, Strategic Reserve, for distribution to the poor, the vulnerable, and those whose livelihood will be affected by the lockdown. The first tranche of about 6,000 metric tons will go to Lagos, Ogun, and the FCT, while the remaining will go to other frontline states in the fight against COVID-19.
The Central Bank of Nigeria says that monetary contributions to its relief fund under the auspices of Private Sector Coalition Against COVID-19 stood at 15 billion naira from 37 donors, including individuals, banks, and other corporate bodies. And finally, the federal government has announced a reduction of the pump price of the premium motor spirit to 123 naira 50 kobo per litre. The new price took effect from Wednesday, April 1, 2020. According to the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency, the new price regime is in line with the federal government's approval for a monthly review of pump price of petrol. Meanwhile, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation has appealed to law enforcement agencies to allow free movement of petroleum products by tanker drivers during the lockdown. The NNPC adds that the nation has over 2.6 billion litres of petrol, enough to last through the period of the lockdown and beyond. The federal government has commenced the disbursement of funds to indigent Nigerians under the Conditional Cash Transfer Program. Speaking at the flag-off ceremony in Kwali Area Council of the Federal Capital Territory, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Mrs. Sadiya Umar Farouk, explains that the government is making an advance payment of 20,000 naira to each poor household to cover the months of March to June.
Exercise has been ongoing for the past 5 years. It's an exercise geared towards supporting the poor and vulnerable households of our society. Give them monthly stipends of 5,000 every month. And now that we have these restrictions, Mr. President has directed we give 2 months advance payment. So we are here today to carry out that directive of paying the 2 months advance.
The federal government is seeking the support of local manufacturers for the manufacturing and supply of some critical equipment such as face masks, gloves and ventilators, which are needed to effectively manage the spread of COVID-19 in the country. Speaking at a daily press briefing by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, the Minister of Health notes that the country is short on supplies for essential health materials.
In view of the prevailing global shortages of particular commodities like masks and protective gowns and even of ventilators, we are going to have conversations with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment to look for indigenous producers, indigenous manufacturers to try and support the effort to find more facilities and commodities that we are going to be using for protection and personal protection equipment.